Welcome, thank you for joining us. I'm Virginia Lee and I'm part of the communications team at ACI Europe. I'm joined by my colleague Veronique Demers, who is part of the communications team at ACI World. We are not the main feature today, these gentlemen are. I'm very, very happy to introduce you again to Olivier Jankovec, who is the Director General of ACI Europe, and Felipe de Oliveira, who is the Director General of ACI World. I am going to invite each of these gentlemen just to say a few words to sum up what they've been speaking about and listening to this morning, but this is mainly about your questions. So after I've given the floor to them, just for a moment, we will move immediately to what you have to ask them. Olivier, can I invite you first just to say a few words?
Yeah, thank you, Virginia. First, welcome. We're very pleased to have you here to review the training conditions and future of the airports in Europe, but also globally. I think for us as European airports, it's much at the moment about finally turning the corner from COVID, being able to be back in the black, as you may have seen this morning, posting a net profit, which is much welcome. But still in a context where it's still difficult because the traffic performance is very diverse across the European market. You may have seen that from the figure, the data this morning. And we carry on a significant amount of debt and liabilities from COVID. And that means that moving forward, a bigger part of the revenue we will get in the future will have to service that debt. So that means that's money that is not available for investment. So a big worry for us is indeed how we can get back on a financial footing that allows us to recover our full investment capacity, knowing that investment need will remain very high for European airports. I think the patterns and the issues on which we will invest will change compared to the past. We're going to have to invest, and we are investing much more in sustainability, in digitalization, in operational efficiency to build more resilience. I think one of the lessons we had from last summer in particular is that at some airports, the aspect of resilience had been a bit put aside. But of course, the resilience costs money, and that brings me to our ability to generate the revenue to pay for the investment and for the resilience. As you know, airports today are really in Europe competing with each other on a pan-European level. Airlines are playing the airport competition supermarket game, and that means there's a lot of pressure to keep the airport charges low. But I think at the same time now where we're seeing the airfares reaching sky levels, and conversely, the charges paid by the users, the airlines, still being not reflecting inflation, far from it. I think in real terms they're actually decreasing. I think there's an equation that doesn't work anymore. So we will need to increase our charges to users. I think behind that, it's adherence to the user-based principle. And I think in the medium to long term, as we know that the traffic growth that we will have will be lower compared to what we have been used in the past, it will be crucial for us to find the ability to indeed increase our unique revenues. And I'll conclude just on three things. When we look at our future, for us it's clear that we have two main challenges. Decarbonization, this is at the top of our priorities. And this is where we need also to work collaboratively, and we're working collaboratively with the rest of the aviation ecosystem. And indeed the reset of our economic model together with digitalization and diversification. So I'll close on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Olivier. Felipe, can I invite you also just to sum up what you've been speaking about and hearing this morning?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Buenas tardes. Very happy to be here. As I mentioned this morning, we are breaking the record in terms of participants. That's saying clear that the world is coming back in terms of aviation, that we are very happy to report that this year in 2023 we will reach around 8.4 billion passengers globally. That's almost 92% of 2019 levels. We are an organization that is a federated organization. That's why we are very happy to work together with ACI Europe and other different ACIs in the world. We have 5 different ACIs in the world plus ACI World. That's why we work collaboratively in a way. And our global aspects of the industry support the global industry aspects, Liquid ICAO and other international organizations. Basically, one thing that I would like to add to the Olivier remarks that is very similar in different parts of the world as well. That's why, of course, the debt is growing. We didn't receive a lot of subsidies from the governments as our partner airlines. We believe that the government did well in support the airlines, but we believe that we need to have an equal treatment as well. As this didn't have, we need to go back and revisit how you deal and how you see the airport charges. The airport charges represent only 5% of the total cost of the ticket, maybe now even less considering that the tickets increase, globally speaking, around 16%, and our charges, considering the inflation, reduce around 4%, considering the inflation, and considering the inflation, of course, for the increase as well in the global level. So we need to revisit the costs, we need to revisit the charges, and I think that won't affect the ability for people to travel. I think we in the industry are clear that people are willing to travel and are willing to pay to travel in certain ways, and basically that will continue to support the growth of the industry. Different parts of the world have different paths in terms of the growth, in terms of how the growth will happen. We are clear that Middle East, especially Asia Pacific, Africa, and Latin America will grow in the faster than Europe, considering that there is the markets to develop. And of course, with that growth, considering globally, we will double the size of the industry in 20 years. Having said that, we need $2.4 trillion to invest, and the access for green finance is extremely important for us and how we can help to decarbonize our airports, and in addition, of course, build the new infrastructure already linked with the standards that are the green infrastructure that we expect for. We are working in different paths. Olivier mentioned this morning a term that I like and I will start to use as well, the energy hubs. I think it's a great opportunity for us to work in the energy side and how we can engage that possibility to improve our sector.
Thank you so much, both gentlemen, for your introductions. The floor is now open. The only request I have is that you do tell us which outlet, channel, publication you're representing. So the floor is open. Who has a question? Please.
Graham Dunn, Flight Global and Airline Business. How difficult do you think it is with the market as it is for you to be able to pass on those increases into airport charges? Do you think airlines, do you think you have the ability to increase your charges?
Well, I think airlines are always resisting. They always want regulators to apply a downward pressure on the level of airport charges. So I think the responsibility is very much with the regulators. At least I can speak for Europe, to realize that we are in a completely different environment in terms of the competitive environment under which airports operate, to realize that we are also under a very different environment in terms of our economic and finance, and to try to regulate not by looking with a rear view, but with a forward view, and to take into account the challenge we have to face. Because that the economic models of airport is still very much based on the assumption that we will continue to have dynamic traffic growth. I mean, we're volume driven. Our charges are set, in advance. They're static. We can't modify them for a certain period of time. And all this is based on, normally the principle that traffic will continue to grow dynamically. But we know that's not going to be the case, at least in Europe. And that, therefore, unit reviews, as I said, will need to increase. Of course, we'll continue to work on efficiencies. I think it's very clear, based on the results I've announced this morning, the fact that we went back into the black last year. That was in great part due to the efficiencies achieved by airports. But there's only so much you can press the lemon, right? At a certain point in time, you need your revenues to catch up with the new economic financial reality, with the investment you need to make. And that will depend on regulators being a bit more realistic about where we stand and where we need to go.
if I may add, the global perspective is very similar. Most of the countries, the airport follow a very strict regulatory framework, and we don't have the ability to adapt the supply and demand as the airlines do. You don't have the ability to have the best use of the infrastructure if you have restricted in terms of these lots as well. That's why basically there is a lot of things that needs to be done. It needs to be agreed. I believe that 85% of the issues that we have, we can work very well together with the airlines, and this 15%, we need to find the ways that we work together, because at the end, we need to improve the system for the passenger. That is mentioned this morning, I usually mention in my interviews, there is no airport without an airline, there is no airline without an airport, but there is no industry without the passenger. That's why everything we need to do is focus on the passenger. We, as airports, we are doing everything we can to improve the services, to improve the ecosystem, the ability of the ecosystem to cope with the demand, and of course the ability for us to invest in infrastructure that will be necessary to better serve the customers that we already have and the customers that will come.
Hi, Chloe Greenbank from Regional Gateway Magazine. Thank you. Chloe Greenbank from Regional Gateway Magazine. Touching on a point that was raised this morning in the airport CEO panel around staff retention, a lot of staff left the industry because of lack of job security, concern around their own security. Do you think enough has been done to address? I know we heard that several airports have increased pay, but has enough been done in terms of ensuring job security, but also attracting the next generation? I have a 15-year-old daughter. Lots of her friends talk about becoming a pilot, an engineer. I very rarely hear them talk about working in an airport, and I don't think the message is out there that actually there's lots of opportunities for young people to think about going forward. So, yeah, the response to that.
Last year we approved a resolution. Every year when you have an assembly approve a resolution, one of the resolutions that we approved was in workforce. And the workforce is not only the workforce as the workforce that we used to have, or the workforce as we have, how we can attract and improve the ability for us to recruit, to have the new generations coming and working for us. We are very intensive jobs. Airports are 24/7. Usually they are far from the city. So we need to create a way that we turn these airports more attractive. And sometimes when I see what happens sometimes in the airports and the way that the aviation sector and the ecosystem is treated, we realize that if we continue to see that day-to-day activities, who want to go to work in an airport if a passenger don't have the proper respect to treat the people, if we are not very well respected by the stakeholders as well from the whole aviation ecosystem. So I think we need to move and change the image of the system. I think we need to work hard to do that. We need your help as well as a press to support that initiatives, because we support 10% of the global economy together with the tourist sector. That's why we are a big part of the solution in terms of generating jobs, generating economic benefits for the industry, and we of course need to work to be more attractive for the youngest generation. That's why how we can bring more airport labs that will create and improve the ability for the young generation come and understand that there is a career in the airports that could be more technological as well. How we can bring opportunities in terms of the diverse world that we have, to have more diversity, inclusion included in our airports as well. And in addition, we have a project on the accessibility as well. Why not also include these people as a possible employees for our members as well? We have 1.5 billion people that already have or have some certain kind of disabilities, visual or not visual, and these people could help us also to improve the system and also to help to better understand the future. So there's a lot of things that we can do. That's a few of them, and I will leave maybe Olivier if you want to add something.
No, I fully agree with what Felipe. I think maybe one aspect is of course that our ability to decarbonize, commitment to decarbonization is very important. Is also changing the perception that the younger generations have about airports, because we know that sustainability is a major driver in the professional choices made by the young generation. So I think there we have an ability, together with the wider business transformation of airports, moving to be part of the energy transition and moving to be an airport. I think that opens a completely different view about what airports are doing and how they're positioned for the future. Another aspect, I think, is automation. I think that opens the prospect to really have less people doing non-qualified, not very interesting, and quite a difficult job, to leave that to machines and try to offer jobs that require more skills, that are more valued by people at the same time.
And I completely agree with Olivier, and if you talk about if you double the size of the industry in terms of the passengers, we won't be able to double the size of the number of the employees. So technology will play a key role.
Yeah, I think if
Ladies
this was the first hand, I think.
Estela Lopez from the Spanish newspaper El Economista. Two questions. I would like to know, why did you decide to do this assembly this year in Barcelona, and what's the balance of the meeting? And the second question is, here in Barcelona there's a political issue about the airport. I don't know if you can talk about the possible solutions for the future of Barcelona airport, because it's sustainability, but growth.
We chose Barcelona because I think Felipe said it in his opening speech. This is a global city that has a lot of appeal. When you organize an event, you want to go to a place where people find it is attractive to go. And there's no doubt that Barcelona is a super attractive destination where people want to go, and the numbers we have, I think, confirm that. When you look at the possible extension of El Prat Airport, I must say personally, I failed to really grasp the rationale behind the resistance to that extension for different reasons. I think the first one is that we know that Barcelona and Catalonia have always been very eager to position themselves on the global map in terms of their economy, in terms of its culture, as a tourism destination. And of course, air connectivity in that context plays a key role, right? And we know that the current infrastructure at El Prat has limitation in terms of the ability for the airport to develop more long-haul connectivity, so to attract people from outside of Europe. And the project that is on the table is exactly addressing that. It will allow Barcelona to develop more long-haul connectivity to Asia and to South America in particular. And I would say that developing long-haul air connectivity to those markets is a key factor for the future of Catalonia and Barcelona. I think we need to keep in mind that for every 10% increase in air connectivity, there is automatically a 0.5% increase in GDP per capita. So, of course, then you need to consider the environmental impact. But from what I know about the project, the environmental impact has been fully factored in, and I think the compensating measures proposed by AENA to address this impact are doubling down in terms of compensating the impact on the environment. And last point, we said this morning that the environment is becoming more difficult for airports in Europe, in the sense that we're reaching capacity limits. So clearly having more capacity is going to be a competitive advantage in the future, not just for Barcelona, but for the airport, but for Barcelona and Catalonia. And we've said also that it is becoming much more difficult for airports to invest, right? And here we have an airport operator, AENA, which is ready and willing to put 1.7 billion euro on the table to pay for this investment. I think there are many other places in Europe, many other communities, regions, and big cities that would be very happy to have an airport operator willing to put that money on the table. But that's a decision that Barcelona and Catalonia has to make and hopefully revisit.
I would like just to add why we choose as a global organization to do the forum here. We rotate the award, that's why we do the WAGA, that is the World Airport Governing Assembly. once a year, and we do every year in a different region. That's why the last time I was here was 5 years ago in Europe, was in Brussels. So we are coming back to Europe in Barcelona, aligned of course with Olivier and his team. And we are going next year to the other regions until we come back here in 5 years in Europe, again aligned with the region. Regarding the airport, I don't have anything to comment. I don't know exactly the project, but I would like to share with you that the airports compete with each other, and regions compete with each other, and the destinations compete with each other. That's why if you have proper investments, of course respecting the sustainability aspects of the industry, but the growth will benefit the population and will provide socio-economic benefits for the region as well. Investments will happen in different parts of the world. So if this investment doesn't happen here, could happen in another place, and Catalonia will lose with that. That's why basically the investments are huge and scarce around the world. So different parts of the world, if they have the investments, they in certain ways compete directly or indirectly with Catalonia.
Yes.
Yeah, I have two questions, if I may. Is this on? Yeah. Max Groot of Momberger Airport Information. A question for both gentlemen. The first one is about the future of airport PPPs or airport privatization. So we see, as you mentioned, Olivier, on the one hand, there are huge investment requirements. Airports around the world will need tens of billions of dollars to keep up with demand for expansion projects. On the other hand, we see, I think all of us can agree here, we live in very strange times. With the next black swan event maybe around the corner, deteriorating political and economic conditions, we just don't know what's ahead. Of course, assumably the private sector will play a large role in coming up with the required monies, but yeah, they would want to recoup their investments, obviously, which might become a larger challenge. And there's already some talk left and right. I'm sure you're aware that some of the larger airport groups have trouble now sticking to their investment commitments. So the question here being, what in that context, what is the future of airport PPPs?
Well, I think in the grand scheme of things, I can speak certainly for Europe. I'll let Felipe comment for the rest of the world, but I think we're seeing similar trends. What we've seen over the last 30 years is that states are no longer willing to pay for airport investment. And that's why in Europe, actually, we were at the forefront when it comes to PPPs or privatization. To be honest, I think considering the fiscal pressures that are now upon states that are bigger than ever, considering the challenges involved with decarbonizing the economy, I don't think that we're going to go back to a place where states are willing to put money into airport infrastructure. So we will need to be able to rely continuously on the private sector. And there, from a European perspective, we look at what is happening in other parts of the world. We look at how the decarbonization agenda is advancing. I think what we see is that a lot of the regulatory approach in Europe is about sticks, like the SAF mandates, which is fine. You need those signals from regulation that you need to uptake a certain percentage of staff. This is of sustainable aviation fuel. This is mandatory. But I think we need also some carrots, and this is where we look with a lot of envy at what the US is doing with the Inflation Reduction Act, where there are significant fiscal advantages for the development, in particular, of sustainable aviation fuel. So I think we need states to also provide the right incentives so that private investors feel that they can keep their trust in investing in aviation, certainly in airport. That means a degree of financial support for the green transition. But that means also legal certainty on the wider rules that apply to the sector. And this is where I come back to the issue of airport charges. That means that I think regulators need also to factor in in the way they look at regulating airports that they need, through their regulation, they play an essential role through their regulation in providing legal certainty to investors about the return they can generate.
If I can add for the global perspective, we are an organization that represents around 2,000 airports in the world, around 790 owners of these airports, and represents 96% of the global traffic. And around 70% of our organization is public sector that manage the airports. And the rest are PPPs or are invested by investors in terms of the approach of the building and development and operated infrastructure. Means we don't have a preference for any kind of type of airport or type of airport operator. But what we are seeing, the pandemic, of course, generate a lot of debt for the countries. That's why countries, especially in the developing world, they don't have the possibilities to do the investments, the necessary investments in the airports, and they know the airports are a key element for them to grow the economy. That's why we are seeing more and more openness for public partnerships as well, public and private partnerships. And I believe, despite of these difficulties to get some money to the markets to invest, we truly believe that the green finance, if it comes in the right way, will help us to build, construct, and operate these airports in the future.
Okay. Then my second question. Considering the times we live in, the uncertain times, is there a way that airports can somehow set themselves up to be more agile, to be able to flexibly react? It's hard, of course, with all the sunken costs that airports have. I can imagine that airports, as a kind of a knee-jerk reaction, maybe want to outsource everything, but we've seen at Schiphol Airport that was maybe the source of many of the troubles that Schiphol went through. So is there a balance between, on the one hand, being being a good employer, a good neighbor, on the other hand, setting up the business in a way that you can respond quickly to all the head-spinning developments that are going on and are coming our way in the future?
I've answered your question in a way. It's a very fine balance and delicate balance to achieve, indeed, because exactly with Schiphol we've seen the consequences of seeking cost efficiency at all costs.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting not so much resilient, you externalize too much of your operations, and somehow you lose control. And I think that we're seeing now I think everybody after last summer realized that resilience is important. Maybe not everybody has yet realized that resilience comes with cost, but that's the reality, and there's little way around it. But of course, I think what we're seeing in Europe is that airports are looking for efficiencies all the time because they have shareholder pressure.
Yeah.
And this is where the fact that you have private investors also generates that shareholder pressure needed to be efficient. But at the same time, I think where you have publicly owned airport, what you see is that states in the end have the same expectations than private investors in terms of the return on their investment about airports. They want dividend, they want efficiency. So I don't see today differences between the two models, really.
We are a long-term business. That's why when you do the investments, we need to plan in advance, we need to invest in advance, we need to work in the finance in advance. We are in a business that you cannot bring back an elevator to the company that provides us the elevator. We need to keep and maintain that elevator independent of the traffic that we have. That's why it's just a few examples that we need to work with the planning. We need to work with the better use of the slots. We need to work with the better use of the infrastructure. That's why efficiencies will count a lot in the future, more than ever. And of course, again, the use of technology and how we can improve the passenger experience, how we can improve the efficiency of the airport using technology as well, and finally, how we can improve our results at the end to continue to invest.
I think Felipe is touching a very important point, is the fact that the way the people that uses your facilities are operating can actually generate significant inefficiencies for you as an airport operator. And I think this is where we have a lot to do to work together with the airlines in particular, but also the ground handlers, to try to and air traffic control, yeah, exactly, to really try to better align all the operational partners, and then you have to do trade-offs, you know, but I think you need to have those open discussions, put everything on the table, and today data actually allows you to look at everything with a clean eye, and look at how we can generate more efficiencies. I mean, the slot regulation from our point of view is something that generates inefficiencies and costs for us, but it gives great flexibility to the incumbent airlines. That's just one example.
And at the end, these cost efficiencies that the approach that the working collaboratively will improve the efficiency for all ecosystem, and much more important, will improve the passenger experience, because for us, if you don't have the passenger, we don't have the income. So the passenger expense in average in our airports, 46% of the income of the airports comes from non-aeronautical revenues.
Yeah.
That's why basically it's very important to have the passengers on the terminals.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Do we have more? Yes.
Please. Got the mic just coming.
It's David Casey here from Roots and ATW. I just wanted to touch more on slot regulation, which seems to be coming back into the discussion more in recent months. We seem to be talking about it a lot more. And we had ARTA saying earlier this month they were the unsung hero and they were calling for global alignment, which is something that ACI World and ACI Europe has resisted, and saying you prefer to see a reform of the system. What exactly do you want to see when it comes to that reform, and shouldn't there be more of an onus on airports to make efficiency improvements to create more capacity?
Well, I think a key aspect for us is the fact that airports today still have little say in the way slots are allocated and used. There's not necessarily a lot of transparency around that. So we would like airports to have more weight in criteria for slot allocation. For example, if you're a large airport congested and you already have 7, 10, 12, 15 frequencies a day to London, well, maybe actually you think that for your communities it's better to have a more diversified portfolio of destination, and you would like that slot to go to another destination. So that's the kind of thing we would like to have more power, more say in the rules and the way the rules are being applied. Another aspect is there are certain practices today that generate, as I said, inefficiencies and wasted capacity. I'll just give you one example, the practice from airlines for overbidding for slots. So airlines in advance of the season, one airline comes and say, well, I'm going to operate, massive program, so many flights. And then when the slot return deadline comes, you realize that actually they return all the slots, and they not all, but they return quite a lot of slots, and they keep a much smaller portfolio. What happens with that is that actually that airline, when it went first and say, I'm going to use all those slots, it sends a signal to the market and to the other airlines. I'm going to be there, I'm going to be dominant, beware. So the other airlines are stepping back, and by the time the slots are returned to the slot pool for coordination reallocation, it's too late, because the other potential airlines that would have been interested, of course, have made their choice otherwise. So that's just one example. We know also that in certain places you have the double dip. I won't go into details of that, but normally you have the requirements to have an 80-20 usage rule. But it appears that at some locations, sometimes actually we're closer to a 70 or a 60 usage rule in effect. So there's things that can be fine-tuned. I'm not sure we want a complete revolution. We understand that there's a need for stability for airlines in terms of planning the network, but we certainly want an overdue evolution.
in the global perspective, we are part of the World Slots Board that includes the coordination of IATA and us. And we were able to join this select group in a few years ago only. And we are not well treated as the level of partnership that we want. It's much better than it used to be. We need to agree that we have some improvements. However, as Olivier mentioned, the 80-20 rule is a rule that is working for so many years, and we don't see the efficiencies. You don't build an airport to use only 80%. To build that, we need to have the better use of this asset, that's infrastructure. Also, in terms of the workforce, if we would like to attend the passengers as we needed, we need to have the flights in advance to prepare and build the capacity for these people that will work at the airports as well. That's why a reform that is agreeable and sustained by the whole industry, I think will be great, and also improve the possibilities to improve the competition as well, and the benefit will go again for the passenger. I think that's our main objective as well, because for us as a regulated tariff, if airline A or B or C will fly, is the same tariff. But for the passenger, they will have certain opportunities, and that will stimulate the market to reach the goals that we expect for the future.
We have hit the 2 o'clock mark, and we're going to miss lunch entirely unless we wrap up quite soon. But if there's any final burning question, I'm sure we can take one more. No?
Let's have lunch.
Well, feel free to approach either myself or Veronique, my colleague here, if you